It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Hey, welcome to the HVACR videos live stream. Hopefully you guys are all doing well. I'm here. I made it. I almost didn't make it today. I was randomly sitting on the couch, talking to my wife, doing some stuff on the internet, having a conversation on Facebook. And then Bill, my buddy, Curious HVAC guy, messaged me and he's like, hey, are you doing a live stream? And I was like, well, I don't know. I totally forgot about it. Like I'd remembered it. I sat down on the couch thinking about it and then just lost my train of thought or I don't know, just got lost in a conversation. And then next thing you know, here we go. But I did it. You guys are here. Welcome to the stream. My name is Chris. For those that don't know me, I'm an HVACR service technician, run a small business here in Southern California, and happen to create videos on YouTube. And I'm assuming that's why you're here, because you probably follow me or have liked something or seen something. You're probably watching this on many different social media platforms. I will say right now, if you guys are watching this on anything other than YouTube, that's all good. It doesn't benefit me any other way differently, right? But YouTube, there's an entire group and a great conversation going on inside the chat. Okay, so again, it's all good if you watch this on Facebook or LinkedIn or any of those different things. But if you want to be involved in the chat, there's lots of great conversations. You definitely want to come over to the YouTube side. But like I said, doesn't make any difference for me. It just might seem a little quiet in the chat if you're by yourself watching this on LinkedIn. So it is what it is. But you know, the whole point of these live streams is so that way it consolidates the questions, right? Because I put these videos out and there's a lot of questions and lots of different things. And the whole point of me starting these was just to kind of take away some of the time that I stare at my phone answering some of the more repetitive questions and just coming in and answering them here in a live format. And then also it gives me a pedestal to stand up here and shout whatever I want to shout to everybody that's watching and, you know, go from there. But, you know, there's a couple things I want to start off the conversation with. But again, Thank you all for coming here. If you guys have questions or comments or things you want me to cover, please feel free to put them in caps lock. It helps me to see them better, okay? If I miss anything that you want me to talk about, shoot me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I don't know how long I'm going to make it because my voice, I'm still recovering, getting over whatever I just had. It seems like I've had a cold for like the last 4 or 5 weeks that like comes and goes and comes and goes. I don't know, whatever. But regardless, it flared up again this weekend. And then I'm doing better now and my voice is recovering and here we are. So I'll try to go as long as I can, but I really appreciate you guys making it here. So I want to start this off and I want to talk about change. Okay. Change in the industry. So I was having an interesting conversation today and, my take on the matter. I'm not an expert. I don't know everything, nor will I ever claim to know everything. But in my humble opinion, I don't know if humble is the right word. Am I a humble person? I don't know if I am. I might be an arrogant person. Who knows? You guys can probably give me a title of whatever you want. But in my opinion, let's say that. In my opinion, change is only going to come to this industry if we want change. Okay. And collectively as an industry, we have to want change, or a good majority of us have to want change. In order to make change happen in this industry, there has to be a collective interest in it, right? Manufacturers, companies, service technicians. There's no way that we, and this is my opinion again, not attacking anybody, okay? These are just my opinions, but there's no way that one person like me is going to stand up here and start making videos and try to do things better. And that's not going to change the entire industry, okay? People have to like want to watch my stuff and say, hey, you know what? He's doing a good job, or hey, he's not doing good enough of a job, so I want to do better, right? And maybe one person and then the next person and the next person. I believe in leading by example as much as possible. But again, understand something. Nobody's perfect, nor am I. I'm never going to be a perfect person, okay? But in order for change to come into this industry, we have to make big changes as business owners, as manufacturers, and as technicians, and we all have to do it collectively. And if we're not in this together, it's not going to get better, okay? We've had a lot of investments into businesses. We've had a lot of money come into this industry in the last 5 years, right? A big giant round of private equity has come in and just dumped a bunch of money into the industry. They buy up supply houses, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, okay? I'm just stating some facts. So this industry, I mean, we as a business owner, I have to make money. I have to make money to stay in business, okay? I have to be able to sell products to stay in business. But there's a fine line there of being ethical, right? You have to be an ethical business owner and you have to make ethical money, because if you're not, then you're hurting the industry. Yeah, I'm making a quick buck, but I'm creating a black eye for the industry if I'm ripping people off, right? And so it's a fine line. And when you have as much money coming into this industry as we've had in the last 10 years from investment companies and all this different stuff that have seen that businesses can make really good money, you know, money really starts to outweigh people's moral compass and kind of pushes it to the extreme. So those are all things that we have to remember. If we want to stay in this industry, if we want this industry to prosper and continue to grow like it has, then we have to be ethical, right? And there's always going to be bad characters out there. There's always going to be people out there. And I'm just going off on a moral rant, okay? There's always going to be people that want to do things and just don't worry about anybody else and just want to make money. And, you know, so be it. I get it. Business is business, but you also have to have, you know, some sort of a moral compass here, right? You have to want to do better. I agree that this industry needs some help. I agree that technicians, for the most part, are underpaid. I agree that technicians are overworked. I agree that there's way too much on technicians' shoulders in some instances where companies expect them to do way too much. And I agree as a business owner that I too have expected way too much of my technicians in the past. We have changed things because we realized a lot of bad mistakes. You know, I've told this story a bunch of times, but I don't know, a while back now, I lost several technicians within a short amount of time. And it wasn't all because of the same reason, but certainly we could have done better in the business to make sure that our technicians were happy. And, you know, we dropped the ball and we lost a bunch of technicians. And that was the birth of this YouTube channel, was me hiring experienced technicians and then having to train the new technicians that were experienced already, but they weren't experienced in the ways that I do things. Okay. So if you actually go back to the very first 2 videos on my YouTube channel, those are still the very first 2 videos. I didn't delete them. Okay. And you'll notice there's a different tone in those videos, right? And if you look at the comments, go to the very beginning of the comments and you'll see people saying, why are you talking to me? Why are you telling me what to do? You know, and it's because I wasn't meant, I didn't make the videos to start for the public. I made them for my employees. Those were for the experienced technicians that I hired, that I was giving them examples of how I do things in my business, right? The very first video on my YouTube channel was a beer walking cooler that had a blown like line 2 fuse at the main disconnect on the roof. And it wasn't me saying, hey, let's just put in a fuse and see what happens. It was me tearing apart that box, spending hours trying to find why a fuse blew. And I found it. And it was a couple different broken wires in the evaporator from vibration that had rubbed out. And the point that I was trying to make to the technicians at the time was that I'm not here to change fuses, because we don't accept the fact in my company that fuses go bad. If you accept the fact that fuses go bad, then you instill something in someone's brain that they always accept the fact that I can't figure it out, so I'm just going to change it and, you know, let's let it go. I'm always going to try my best. And so that was the whole point, the whole birth of this YouTube channel. Eventually someone convinced me to hit the public button. I did. And then it just became a thing. Right. But again, I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody, because I'm not. I am probably one of the most flawed people that you guys know. Right. I have my own crazy issues. Now I'm pretty vocal about my own issues because I try to correct them and grow from them. But back to the point that I was starting to make in the beginning was, in order for change, in my opinion, to happen in this industry, we have to want it. And it needs to come from all different levels. I feel like manufacturers are the start of the change. Manufacturers need to want change to happen, right? If we don't have the big box manufacturers, the big box residential manufacturers out there wanting change, right? The big box residential manufacturers and even commercial manufacturers, they're concerned with selling boxes, right? They want to move boxes. They want to move evaporators. They want to move condensers. They want to move heat pumps. They want to move all this different stuff. And that's fine. They're a business. They have to make money. But if they incentivize companies to push these boxes as fast as they're pushing them, and then put more pressure on them to say, hey, last year was great. This year, do better. We'll give you a bonus if you do better. You know, we'll give you discounts, heavier discounts on the equipment if you do better. We'll accept the fact that your warranty service calls are through the roof, but it's okay. We'll deal with that, right? If those manufacturers aren't wanting change, if they aren't wanting these big box companies to change, then what incentive do the big box companies have to do to change, right? Especially when you have all this equity coming into the industry, this money. That's investment firms that are like, wow, we can make this much money if we keep pushing. And they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And, you know, all these companies are just selling and selling and selling. And what's happening when they're selling? The faster and more that they sell, the less quality goes into the install, and the less quality goes into the install. And again, these are all my opinions, okay? But the less quality goes into the install, and then the entire industry gets a black eye. The same thing's happening on the commercial side too, okay? Because the commercial side, we've got companies improperly installing things. And I'm going to be the first person to tell you that I'm not perfect and I don't install things correctly. Okay. I've been trying to do my best. I've definitely turned a leaf in the last 10 years and tried to be a better service technician and a better person running a business, but I'm not perfect. Okay. But I'm trying and I'm trying to be better every single day. But if we don't have other people trying, this isn't going to get any better. There's no way we're going to get, and I'm going to go off on, again, I'm just turning this into a giant rant, but it is what it is, right? You know, one of the biggest pet peeves I have, like I've always been so intrigued with grocery store refrigeration, right? And this is just an example I'm giving. I've always been so intrigued with grocery store refrigeration. I think it's really interesting, but I could never do it and never will do it because of the demanding hours. And I think it's ridiculous. If you look at the statistics on mental breakdowns, on I'm sorry to say the scary word, but suicide rates, on divorces, on broken families, on all that stuff, a lot of that comes from the grocery store refrigeration side, right? And look at drug addiction. And I'm not saying every grocery store technician is any one of those things, but I'm just saying those statistics are really high in grocery refrigeration. And so let's step back and look at it. Grocery refrigeration has one of the most demanding work schedules. The overtime is through the roof, but they make it sound appealing. You could get all the overtime you want. You could make $200,000 a year working grocery store refrigeration. That sounds great, but at what cost? Your mental stability, your family, your health. Again, people are driven by money a lot of times, and that's a horrible thing. So this industry needs a big shift. It needs a big change, and it needs to be more concerned with its technicians. It needs to be more concerned with doing things right and getting things done. But it also needs to be, less. And I know this is a hard thing because it's a fine line, because we're all in business to make money, right? We all need to make money, but there's got to be a tipping point here, because we can't just keep killing service technicians, right? Breaking them down. By the time you're 45, 50 years old and you've been a grocery store technician your entire life, your body's broken down and beat down, right? Your mental capacity's through the roof. The energy drinks you drink on a daily basis, the cigarettes you smoke. And again, that could be said about anything, right? And there's also an argument to be made that, that technicians have their own free will and can choose to do what they want. That's fine. But the industry has a responsibility too, to not demand so much of technicians, right? So this industry needs change. I don't know what the answers are. I'm not going to pretend like I'm the prophet that's going to tell you guys how to fix all these problems. But I do know that one thing one thing that I do know is that you as a technician have the ability to say no. You have the ability to say, I'm not into this anymore. I don't want to work that hard, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, work an honest day's work. Of course you should, right? We all have to understand there's a fine line in every different aspect right here, right? Everybody needs to work hard, but there's also a point of what is too much. I mean, let's look at it this way, right? Some of the hours that grocery store technicians work, truck drivers can't drive diesel trucks, but grocery store technicians can work longer hours than truck drivers that drive diesel trucks. But on the flip side, let's take it out of this industry, right? Let's talk about police officers. The amount of hours in overtime that police officers can work is contradictory to what they let diesel truck drivers drive. But police officers have to carry guns on their side and go to work every day. So it's not just an HVAC. It happens all over the place. But I'm going to get off this high horse and we're going to get back to some normal stuff that we want to talk about. But the point is that this industry needs some change, and it needs change for the better. Okay. So I'm done with my rant for the moment. I'm sure I'll come up with something else to rant about here in just a moment. Okay. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat right now. I'm going to read through this and see what I'm missing here. Anyone can do this job, but not everyone should. That's true. All right, reading through the chat, seeing what I'm missing. Okay, cool. So I had a video that I released I had two videos that I released last week, but one of them had a couple different questions on it, and I kind of wanted to cover those. So when I address someone's question, I am not criticizing anybody. I'm answering questions, or I'm correcting them and stating some facts, okay? So don't feel like I'm, honing in on you and just trying to ridicule you. I'm not. Okay, I'm just addressing things. And this particular person that raised this question, I addressed it in the chat, and I'm going to talk about it right here too a little bit. Okay, so the question was in concern to a head pressure control valve. My gosh, I talk about these things in nauseum. They really are an misunderstood device, and a lot of people just don't understand what they do. A lot of people point fingers in the refrigeration industry at them because they're always failing, and they're just horrible devices according to the refrigeration industry. Now, this is a low ambient control. This is the simplest head pressure control valve to explain. It's also the simplest head pressure control valve to cut apart. So that's why I'm going to talk about it, because if you try to cut apart an OROA valve, boy, are you in for a world of headaches, because they're very difficult to cut apart. Trust me, I've tried a bunch and ruined a bunch. They're very, very difficult. Okay. So we're going to talk about the LAC valve. The LAC valve. Now I'm going to ask the chat right now, what is the main purpose of the LAC head pressure control valve in a refrigeration system? Okay. I'm looking for one specific answer. Anybody in the chat, give it to me right now. Okay. So this is a head pressure control valve. and it serves a single purpose in a standard refrigeration system. We're not talking about ice machines. We're talking about just a standard walk-in cooler. What is the purpose of this head pressure control valve? I want to ask people. Mr. Green says headmaster. Okay, great. Great point. While I'm waiting for everybody to answer the question that I asked him, I'm going to address the headmaster. Headmaster is a trade name for an Alco head pressure control valve. It's trademarked. Emerson owns I don't know if they still have a trademark on it or what, but so head pressure control valve is the proper term. This is a Sporlan LAC valve, so we call it a head pressure control valve, not a headmaster, but a lot of people call it a headmaster, same term. Okay, so Jason Johnson says flooding the condenser. Jason Wright says maintaining pressure. Keith Peterson says constant head pressure. Those are all great answers. Not the answer I'm looking for, but they're all right. They're not wrong, but that's not the answer I'm looking for. Super Tech says maintain head pressure for a TXV. That's about the closest that I've seen so far, and I'm going to go ahead and run with that one. There you go. The Big M Supper Club hit the exact answer that I wanted, and he says maintain pressure differential across the TXV. And that is the answer I'm looking for. Now, all the other answers are still correct answers, okay? Head pressure control valve controls head pressure, okay? It maintains a set head pressure, but the point of maintaining that set head pressure is to maintain a pressure differential across the expansion valve, okay? Thermostatic expansion valves are a dumb device. They really are. They're really cool and they're really awesome, but they're kind of dumb and they have a limited operating range at which they can control superheat within. And without a constant pressure differential across the thermostatic expansion valve, they start to lose control of the superheat and they can create problems within the system. Okay, so let me grab an expansion valve from back here. Oh, it was right in front of my face. I'm looking for parts I have all over my office. So I have a really simple cutaway of a thermostatic expansion valve. If you guys want to know, Brian Sanders, thank you very much for that super chat. Did I set the Manitowoc trainers straight at the training? No, I had a really, really good training actually. So there was nobody that needed to be set straight, but yeah, that is a funny point, but thank you for that super chat. So we have a really easy cutaway here of a thermostatic expansion valve. This is a Sporlan flare valve. If you want to know how to make these cutaways, I got a couple of them. I made these myself. Okay. I'll give you the best advice. If you want to do a cutaway for an expansion valve yourself, buy yourself about 4 flare expansion valves, take the entire expansion valve apart in pieces to where it's just the body, get a bandsaw and start with the first one, cut it and realize that you cut it in the wrong place. The second one, the third one, it took me about 4 or 5 to get this cut away and be happy with it. Okay. It doesn't come out looking as perfect as this. Then I polish it and then put all the guts back in it. I cut the power head apart. Just that way you can see the simple operation of a thermostatic expansion valve. Okay. So this expansion valve is meant to maintain superheat, right? That's all. That's the intended purpose of the expansion valve, right? Maintain superheat, create a pressure drop across from the liquid line into the evaporator to change the state of the refrigerant to allow for the evaporator to absorb heat, right? But that expansion valve only works in a limited range. That's the easiest way to understand that. And to keep it in that limited range, we have a head pressure control valve. The head pressure control valve right here, this is the simplest one to understand, is an LAC valve from Sporlan. This one, this particular valve has a sticker on the side. Let's see if I can show you guys. And it says LAC 4240. This head pressure control valve basically is telling us that if the discharge pressure, well, let's just look at it. Let's look at the basic operation. They're really simple. You have a dome that's charged with pressure. It's pushing down on a pin onto a seat with a spring opposing the dome pressure. Okay. So discharge pressure comes in right here on the bottom. And if you want to know like the different pressures, actually that's condenser pressure. It tells you on the side of the valve too. If you look right there, I don't think you guys are going to be able to see, but there's letters stamped in there. On the bottom, it says C, and then it says D, and then R. Okay. So you've got receiver pressure, discharge pressure, and condenser pressure. So basically it's looking for the stamped pressure on the side right there. This one says 240 PSI. So we've got 240 PSI of pressure in the top of this head pressure control valve pushing down on this spring. And it's looking to push harder than what's coming out of the condenser. So if the condenser pressure drops below 240 PSI, this head pressure control valve starts to bypass. And then what it does is it starts dumping discharge gas into the liquid line, going into the receiver, and then going down to the expansion valve. But let's think about that for a second. If we're dumping discharge gas into the liquid line and it's going to the expansion valve, we're going to have a problem, right? Because this expansion valve is meant to operate with a solid column of liquid going through it. If we don't have a solid column of liquid going to this expansion valve, again, it starts to lose control. Remember I said this expansion valve can only operate within a certain window, right? A certain band. So it has to have liquid refrigerant coming to it, and it also has to have a set pressure differential across the valve. It has to be able to push that refrigerant through the valve for it to be able to meter appropriately. So this head pressure control valve is set to maintain a certain pressure. And when the condenser pressure gets lower than the dome pressure on this LAC valve, it starts to bypass and it starts to dump that discharge vapor into the receiver and then go down to the liquid line. But like I said, this expansion valve can't handle vapor refrigerants. So what we have to have in the system is something called the winter charge. The winter charge is extra refrigerant sitting in the system. And I'm going to go ahead and address this right now. If your system is designed properly, okay, the term winter charge does not mean that you put it in the winter and you remove it in the summer, okay? That is an antiquated term. It really should be called flooded charge. And that's what I should have said, is called a flooded charge. But a lot of people use the term winter charge, okay? So the flooded charge stays in the system if it's designed properly all year long and is only used in low ambient conditions when the head pressure control valve bypasses. So this thing takes discharge vapor, dumps it into the liquid line, okay? Now, it doesn't completely shut off all the time. It still allows some refrigerant to come through, but it starts to back up refrigerant into the condenser, driving up the head pressure. Then it also takes some discharge gas, dumps it into the liquid line. But because we have a flooded charge in the system or a winter charge sitting in the receiver just waiting, it dumps that vapor refrigerant right on top of that liquid, and then it starts to condense the liquid, and then it pushes the rest of the liquid that's already stored in the receiver down to the expansion valve. So because we have that extra flooded charge, this expansion valve doesn't get vapor to it, it gets liquid refrigerant to it, and it continues to operate properly in low ambient conditions, okay? So the information that was incorrect about the person that commented on my video was he was correcting me, saying that I was incorrect in the way that I described how this valve worked, because the particular person thought that this little pigtail right here was sensing the outdoor ambient temperature, and that is not the case. And there's nothing wrong for saying that. I'm not criticizing the gentleman. I'm just correcting. This little pigtail is simply there so they can charge this dome with the pressure needed to oppose the condenser pressure. That's all it's there. This right here is just a spot so they can charge this with refrigerant or nitrogen. It's probably just nitrogen refrigerant. Who knows what's in there? It's probably just nitrogen because it's not really reacting to temperature. So yeah, in a head pressure control valve, I bet you anything it's just nitrogen. But still, that little pigtail right there is just so they can charge it. Now I'm going to quiz you guys real quick and ask you, and then we'll jump on to some other things. So I have a standard LAC valve right here, okay? This one has a bypass pressure of 210, you can see because it's stamped on the side. Now, what's this one? This is an LAC valve too, but this one's a little different. This one has a different head on it. Does anybody know what this one's meant for and why this one is different? And if you could actually read the numbers on this one, there's going to be two pressures. It's going to say 70 and more than likely 180. So it's going to have a 70 and 180 stamped on the side of this guy. So what does that mean? What do you guys think that this one, why is this one different than this one? Anybody in the chat have an answer to that one? All right, let's see what else we got going on. I'm reading through here right now. Froggy says a top hat. Okay. Okay, someone said that you can, if the bulb loses its charge, you can charge it with pressure. Hold on. There we go. Sorry. Let's see if someone answers this. Rack system, it's adjustable. Ray's onto it right there. Supertech says it's adjustable head pressure in use with the discharge bypass valve. Not quite. It's not that complicated. This is a dual pressure element right here. That's all that it is. This is a dual pressure element. So it does look like another valve, but it's not. This is a standard LAC valve, and it has two pressures stamped on it, 70 and 180. I don't understand why they do this, but if you ever see this out in the field, it literally means that if you clip the tip on it, it'll now bypass at 70 PSI and not at 180 PSI anymore. So I really should have asked the guys at Sporlan, like, why do they have dual pressure elements on here? And it's also stamped on the side right here, 70 and 180. But yeah, if you cut the tip of this right here and relieve the pressure, it's now going to bypass at 70 PSI instead of 180 PSI. So it's just a dual pressure element is all that it is. Now, Jason Johnson says no clipping the tip. And that's a great point, okay? Yeah, it does look like a hot gas bypass valve too, says SuperTech. That's a great point. It does look like a hot gas bypass. Yeah, it's an LAC valve. So it's just a dual acting element inside of there. So another really good point that Jason says is don't clip the tip. So what can happen, a failure that can happen on these valves is that the bellows on here, if you look at it, let's see if I can get the camera to focus. It's kind of hard for you guys to see, but the bellows is a really, really thin piece of metal. And that bellows can actually fail sometimes, and refrigerant pressure or liquid refrigerant can get up into the top of that. And then if you were to clip the tip, theoretically, this could dump the refrigerant charge out of the system. Now, in a properly operating head pressure control valve, like this one, I'm pretty sure I've never cut this one apart, but I'm pretty sure this one's meant to have the tip clipped if you want to reduce the pressure. So they've got some extra safeties built into this one, but that's just a random fun fact. If you ever see this one and it's not being used in a hot gas bypass function, it is literally a dual acting element. And, LAC4, and I think it says DS and then 7180 is what it is. So, but the whole purpose of the head pressure control valve is to maintain that pressure differential so the expansion valve can work properly. Okay. So, okay, reading through the chat right now. You guys are going funny with these comments right now. So, all right, let's see. These videos should be cut into micro learning videos with these excellent explanations. Yeah, I got to figure out how to do that, Ty. So I don't know about excellent. So let's address that really quick. How in the heck do I know how this valve works? Well, I'm going to be honest with you guys. The reason why I know how this valve works is because I changed enough of them in my career that I finally cut one open. And I'm going to be honest with you. I've probably changed quite a few of these that weren't bad because I didn't understand how they worked. And it was just that mystery component. And if I couldn't figure out how a system worked, it's like, you know, in the beginning when I was just a parts changer, it's like, I don't know, that might be the part. Let's change that. No, that didn't fix it. Oh no, let's change that. No, that didn't fix it. I changed a lot of parts in my career that didn't need to be changed. Okay. So I'm not this perfect person. Don't think that. I really, you know, I'm not the perfect technician. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I can guarantee you that a lot of the mistakes that I've made in the very infancy of my career, you know, probably I wouldn't be able to make these days. Customers wouldn't accept them. Okay. I've just made a lot of stupid mistakes, right? I can tell you, you know, back in the day before Facebook was a thing, there was a message board called HVAC Talk. It still exists, but it's not what it used to be, right? But it was hvactalk.com, I think that's what it was, .com. Yeah, but that's how I learned a lot, was by asking questions. And people were for the most part, they were pretty kind on HVAC Talk. So when I didn't understand something, I'd ask a question on there and these people would answer them. And then I'd start, you know, researching and learn more. But I'll tell you that the one pivotal moment in my career was when I called technical support for a Hoshizaki ice machine. And we're talking freaking 24 years ago. It was a long time ago. I was working on a Hoshizaki ice machine, a flaker machine. And I don't remember exactly why I wanted to know what I called technical support, and I was worried about an expansion valve not working. I remember that. And I remember the tech support guy on the other end of the line asking me what the superheat was. And I didn't know what superheat was. So I just said, "What's superheat?" And he hung up on me. Okay. And I was embarrassed. I was really embarrassed because I was like, I needed to fix this ice machine, you know? So I came up with some lame excuse for the customer. And I said, "Hey, you know, I got it working. But I'm gonna come back tomorrow because I'm just not 100% comfortable with the way that this machine works or is working. And I want to talk to the manufacturer, but they're closed. So I'm gonna call them in the morning and I'll be back tomorrow. And we're gonna figure this out and we're gonna get it right." That was my code for, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I told that to different customers, came up with this really cool thing. Like, oh yeah, I really want to make sure you guys are taken care of. So I'm going to come back tomorrow, but I got it running, but it's just not running the way I want. That was code for, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And that was what I told the manager when I got hung up on by Hoshizaki tech support. And then I went on HVAC Talk and started researching what's superheat. How do I do this? And that's what really propelled my career, was getting hung up on the phone. Now, was it right that the technician on the other end of the line hung up on me? No, but he sparked me and got me going. I mean, it did what it needed to do, because the next day when I called them back, I knew what superheat was and I knew how to measure it and I knew how to give them the information they needed. Was I accurately measuring it? No, at the time I was using analog gauges and pipe clamp thermometers. So you weren't getting real-time superheat, but you were getting a quick reading. And I pretty much can guarantee you the expansion valve wasn't the problem with that Hoshizaki machine. I don't even know what it was, but I just know that's what sparked me and changed my career, was getting hung up on by tech support. So let's see what the chat has to say. Do any of my clients' locations have AON units, or have they considered them before? I've serviced AON units on an Applebee's years ago, but no, I don't have any AON units currently at any of my customers. So let's see. It's always the TXV, says Steve. That's everything HVACR. Yeah, exactly. Alaska says the superheat story. Yeah, I've probably told that to enough of you guys that watch my content. You've probably heard me tell that story a million times, but that changed me for sure. So all right. So now that I'm done with the expansion valves, now that I've done with the head pressure control valves, let's get on to a few other things. So again, if you guys have questions or things you want me to cover, throw them in the chat in caps lock. I'll try to get to them. Okay. I'm going to read through this, my list of stuff right here. So, okay. So again, one last thing about the head pressure control valves. What's the bypass pressure? Again, the bypass pressure is going to be the pressure inside the dome of this head pressure control valve. I just want to make sure this is clear. That is the bypass pressure. So on an LAC valve, it's looking at condenser pressure versus the dome pressure. And the dome pressure is always trying to counteract the condenser pressure, so that way the valve can bypass. So when I say bypass pressure, that's what's stamped on the valve. This one's 240 PSI. That's the pressure in the dome of this guy pushing down on that spring. So for this valve to bypass, it needs 240 PSI of condenser pressure or higher to operate properly. And properly is going to be coming out of the condenser, going into the liquid line, right? So it comes out of the condenser, goes through the liquid drain. Well, no, let's step back. You've got discharge pressure coming out of the compressor, goes into the condenser, comes out of the condenser as it goes down, converts it to liquid, then it goes through the valve and then down into the liquid line. Okay. So that's the normal operation. All right. So I want to address this too. I get a lot of comments in my videos talking about my improper brazing techniques. I overheat everything. The flame's too hot. I use way too much solder. I get it. Okay. Funny story. I haven't released this video yet. I still need to work on it. I went back to Georgia to go visit some friends of mine at Heatcraft Refrigeration, right? Because I worked with them on a bunch of different projects this last year. And so I got to go out and tour the factory. And one of the cool things that I got to do, I've probably told this story a few times, but one of the cool things I got to do was I got to go tour the plant. And one of the fun things was I got to go through their braze training, right? I got to meet a lady named Leslie that works in Heatcraft, really, really nice lady. And she's in charge of the brazing, right? So she's the one that makes sure the technicians are using proper techniques and brazing their equipment together. And it was kind of fun. But I asked the guys at Heatcraft and I was like, hey, can I go through braze training? And they were like, yeah, we'll set that up, right? So they convinced Leslie to go ahead and give me the braze training exam, and I failed it. Okay. And so Leslie was, and I'm 99% sure her name is Leslie. So if your name wasn't Leslie, I apologize, but I'm almost positive it was Leslie. Okay. So Leslie was a little reluctant to criticize me and to critique me and to give me what I needed to hear. But I already knew my flaws. I already know that I overheat things. Okay. I already know that I use way too much solder. Okay. As a technician, as a contractor, there's certain things that I'm going to do in certain situations. In a perfect factory lab condition, of course, my braze joints need to be perfect, the right amount of heat, the right amount of solder. But in the field, sometimes you got to do things. Sometimes what people don't understand, and I'm not talking about Leslie now, I'm talking about the people that comment on my videos that I'm not brazing properly. Okay. sometimes in the field we have to do certain things. Okay. Sometimes I may have to use more heat because I just can't see something. Sometimes I'm in an awkward situation. Okay. So I'm not going to say that I'm perfect. I'm not. Okay. But it works for me. It's all good. Okay. I don't make these videos to be like an educational channel. Now, I realize there's some educational value out of what I'm doing, but to be honest and fair, I'm raising my hand to tell you, I've never taken braze training. I've never gone to brazing school. I haven't. Okay. I'd love to. Actually, my certificate for HVACR, I kind of feel bad because my instructor, Darrow Soares, who was the lead of my HVACR training school at Mount San Antonio Community College. I recently ran into him a couple years ago, and him and I were just talking back and forth. And it just came up that I never finished HVAC school. And he goes, "You never finished?" And I go, "No, I only have 2 classes to finish: technical mathematics for HVACR and brazing. Those are the only 2 classes I have to finish. So that way I can actually get a certificate in HVACR. So it'd probably be smart of me to go back and take that brazing class. Maybe I'll learn something. I'm sure I will. Okay. On a side note, that's when I also learned that because I never finished the program, that I'm actually hurting the community college, because they actually get, it's better if the students actually finish the program as opposed to not finishing and just moving on. So I really do need to go finish that up just to complete that task. And, you know, actually, I'd be honest with you, I'd like to end up getting a bachelor's and all that stuff just for giggles. I want to talk about something else too. I want to talk about the fact that, you know, there is a massive push out there right now against schooling. Okay. And I agree that for everybody, college does not fit. Okay. But I feel like the pendulum is swinging the opposite direction. Now, I am an advocate for college is only for certain people and not necessarily for everybody. Okay. I don't like the fact that a lot of, you know, schools, high schools and different things are really incentivized to push kids into college, and they don't really tell them about trades. And I think trades are a great thing for a lot of different people. Clearly for me, right? I didn't succeed in college, but I regret not having a college degree later in life. Now, would that college degree have changed very much about me? Probably not. But I really wish I would have gone to business school. I would have struggled a lot less with the business side of things, because that's what I struggle with the most in running a business, is just managing the business side, right? Dealing with the numbers and all that crap. I don't understand half of it, and I'm just winging it, to be honest with you. Okay. So I really wish that I would have finished school. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I don't think there's anything bad with college. I just don't think that college is the solution for everybody. And I think that schooling in general is going to be dependent on the individual, right? And everybody needs to know that there's nothing wrong with going to college, and there's nothing wrong with not going to college if that's what you want to do. There's going to be ramifications for both. If you go to college and you go to a fancy university, you're probably going to end up walking away with some student debt, unless you're, you know, very well off. Okay. Or if you just go to trade school, you know, and get a degree, you can succeed and be very successful with that trade school certificate or whatever it may be. But there's nothing wrong with someone wanting to go to college. And I would encourage people, if they're capable of finishing college, right, going through, getting some sort of a degree, a bachelor's, an associate's, something like that. But the important thing, I think, is for people to understand that just because you have an engineering degree, just because you have an associate's degree in HVAC, just because you have a bachelor's degree from Ferris State University in Michigan, doesn't mean that you're the best service technician in the world. And just because you finished a bachelor's program doesn't mean that you're going to do any better than a guy that just has a certificate from a trade school. Okay. Because it all depends on the amount of effort that you want to put into your career. So college is not going to make you a better person necessarily. Trade school is not going to make you a better person necessarily. It all depends on you as a person and how much effort you put into it. Okay. So I don't want people to think that college is a bad thing. It's not. Okay. I'm encouraging my daughters to go to college because that's the path that's best for them, in my opinion. But if they chose not to, I fully support that too. Okay. So that's just my rant on that one. Let's see what else we got. When the customer's trying to diagnose equipment because they're an engineer. Yeah, for sure. That can be frustrating. I can say that for sure. So, There is no one right path. Look at all the options and choose the best path for you, says Ty Brannaman. 100% true. The one thing I will caution people to is don't encourage people to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on an education, right? You really got to do the math and weigh out the options. Don't just assume because you get $100,000 education that you're going to make more than $100,000 a year. That's not necessarily the truth, okay? You really got to weigh out the options. And those are discussions that I have with my daughters is, hey, okay, so college is an option. Where's the path that you want it to lead you to? How much money could you potentially make? And what are the odds from that starting point of where you're going to make that money? And how quick is the payoff? Those are all things that they have to think about. You know, so just because you go to college and get a engineering or a bachelor's degree from, and the reason why I brought up Ferris State University was because I had a gentleman that reached out. I do another show with my friends, if you guys don't know, a very uncensored show called the HVAC Overtime Show. If you get your feelings hurt or you don't like bad words, you definitely don't want to search up that show. But if you like to laugh and hang out, the way I describe the show is it's like you're 4 beers deep with the guys at the bar on Friday after work, and that's where the show starts. It's just a bunch of guys hanging out talking about work. But one time I mentioned that I always wanted to get a bachelor's degree through Ferris and finish my program. And this gentleman criticized me because he said that he got a bachelor's degree from Ferris State University and he spent all this money and he still can't get more than a job paying him X number of dollars an hour, and it's not gotten him anything. And I told the gentleman, like, look, man, I'm sorry to say this, but you're the reason why you're not making more money. It's because of your attitude and the way that you treat it. And you know, so he had some false hopes of what this bachelor's degree was going to do for him. And it's like, no, that doesn't work that way. So anyways, all right. The right path is to steal enough copper to fund your education. Yeah. Don't listen to Alaska. Don't listen to Alaska. All right. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. What brand of leak detector do I use for refrigeration? So Steve, I have 2 leak detectors on my van. I have the Fieldpiece DR82 leak detector, and I have the Infocon Stratus. Both of them, in my opinion, for the light commercial refrigeration work that I do, are head to head. One of them costs $400 more than the other one. So you guys figure out which one you want to do. Okay. The Infocon Stratus is a great leak detector. It's very, very expensive. The Fieldpiece is a lot cheaper, but I still use them both. I'm not saying don't buy the Stratus. I'm not saying don't buy the Fieldpiece. I'm saying weigh out the options. Which one works best for what you do? A lot of people like to buy the Stratus because it has this really cool PPM readout on it. And whenever I see people posting pictures or videos on social media, they always have their leak detector on the PPM mode. But did you know something? Did you know that the PPM readout on the Infocon Stratus is actually not the most sensitive method of using their leak detector? They actually have the, I don't know what they call it, but if you put it on the normal one that just shows an audible little gauge, that's the actual most sensitive method. The PPM readout, when it gives you a parts per million readout, what that is meant for is when you have a rack room, right? A giant enclosed room or a giant walk-in cooler that has a leak so giant that your leak detector is going insane the moment that you open the door. So your leak detector is essentially useless, okay? So what they do is they have a PPM mode that gives you a parts per million readout, and it zeroes itself out inside the box and then gives you the parts per million readout in a totally saturated environment that you're walking into. So that way you can find the leak when there's lots of refrigerant. But here's the interesting thing. If you're ever in a situation where you need the parts per million readout, you should be wearing a respirator, because that means that there is enough refrigerant in that room or in that space that your leak detector cannot even pinpoint that leak. So that means you should not be breathing that air, and you should be wearing a respirator when you're trying to find that leak. So that's just something that I find comical when I see people using that. It's like, you know, that the PPM readout is not the most sensitive way. It's just that people, I think, see that on Instagram and they see it on YouTube and they're like, oh, I want that because it gives me the PPMs. And then they're like, but if you put it on the other mode, it's like the super mode or something like that. That's actually more sensitive, and you can actually find leaks that are smaller than the PPM readout. So anyways, Super Tech says he does supermarkets and he loves the Stratus, and that's great. Let's see. Who's your daddy says, yes, I have. It backfired. Not saying, just saying. Don't know what that means. But everyone in the YouTube chat, what's up, guys? Yes, Mike, that's the point. So if anybody's in here right now, Mike Cianfrocco's in here right now. So that's the point that I make. I don't care where people watch this. I don't care if you're in Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I don't know. I stream on a bunch of different platforms. But if you want to interact with the people, you got to come to the YouTube side because that's where everybody's at. So, okay. So, Super Tech said he had a 5-door case dump 1,000 pounds of R22 inside the case, and you could smell the refrigerant a week later. I'm going to tell you guys a funny story. I've probably told this before. If you guys have watched, you've probably heard this, but I had a new gentleman, doesn't work for me anymore, but he's a friend of mine. I still communicate with him to this day. His name's Sean. And Sean, if you're listening or if anybody knows Sean, tell him I'm telling this story, okay? Sean no longer lives here, but he moved away, but a really cool dude, friend of mine. So Sean was working with me. He was still an apprentice, and we were working at a hospital. We had to work on a 4-passenger morgue cooler, right? So it has 4 doors on it. You can fit 4 gurney thingies in there, whatever. And customer called because they had a fan motor not working, or I think they had a couple fan motors, and we ended up changing. It was like a evaporator up in the top of the 4-passenger cooler, and I think it had like maybe 5 or 6 motors or something like that, little skeleton motors, the EM690 motors, right? And so we went ahead and replaced them all because they had like 3 of them that were bad, and the customer is totally proactive, so we're like, let's just do them all, no problem. We put all new motors in that thing, and they called me back that night. So we changed them that day, probably 3-4 in the afternoon, something like that. They called me at like 2 in the morning. They're like, dude, the morgue cooler is like, smells like something's on fire. You need to get out here. So by the time we got back out there, it's probably like 6 in the morning. And what had happened was and again, I don't blame Sean for anything. It was all my fault because he was still an apprentice, still new. I just handed him the motors, said, put them in. He put them in. Well, I handed him the wrong voltage, and he put the wrong voltage in there. So we put 115 volt motors in a 230 volt system. So it ran for a few minutes after we left, but it burnt up every single of the like 5 or 6 motors that we put in that evaporator. And that morgue cooler smelled like burnt electrical for years after that. Like the plant guys at that hospital used to give me so much crap. They used to make fun of me and laugh at me. They totally understood. We made it right. We got it fixed, but man, that thing smelled so bad, let alone it has other smells that are in a 4-passenger cooler. But yeah, that was expensive. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was a funny thing to laugh about now. But like I said, I've made so many mistakes in my career. It's funny to laugh about them now. So any manual instruction here, you need some help. Don't know what you mean by that, my good friend. You can try superheat. I don't know what you mean, bud. All right, reading through the chat. What else am I missing inside here? All right, cool. All right, got a couple more things on my list right here. That's not really, do I actually have, oh, good question. Do I have a gas/oxygen warning device on me when I go into enclosed spaces, especially when I'm using torches? Okay, by OSHA regulations, if you are in a confined space, you are supposed to have certain things to protect you in confined spaces. Surprisingly, if you actually start looking into OSHA regulations, you'll find out that almost any space in the world is a confined space. It's kind of silly what their ramifications are for or their instructions are for a confined space, but there's specific regulations and rules that you have to follow. If you're dropping into a pit, of course, you got to have ventilation devices. You have to have means of getting you out of there, things like that. But the person was asking me if I have an oxygen gas meter or something like that I keep on me. No, I don't. I really should. But he was specifically talking about when I was working in an attic, and he was curious if it was well ventilated enough that as I was brazing up in the attic, if it was going to be a problem. In that situation, I'm working in an attic that was very well vented. And what that particular person didn't know too was we also had a giant roof access opened above the space that I was working in that you guys couldn't see in the video. I was laying on top of a walk-in, and there was probably a 24 by 24 opening where all the line sets went down right above my head where I was working. So that was ventilating the space really well. But I really would like to get a personal meter to have on me that could measure different things. Surprisingly, I just saw a link for a personal device that you could configure, or you can order it where it would do 4 different gases or something like that. I haven't figured out how accurate it is, but it is an interesting device. But yeah, it would be something smart to keep on me. For in my situation, I would like to have something that monitors CO2. I would like to have something that monitors nitrogen. And then I would like to have something that monitors combustible gases of some sort, maybe carbon monoxide. That would be kind of cool. So that would be like 4 devices, and that's a lot to carry on me. But when I work in beer walk-ins, oftentimes they could be filled with nitrogen, depending on what type of beers they're pushing. They could also be filled with CO2. I'll tell you another funny story. I got a service call one time on a walk-in freezer not working. And when I got there, I opened the door and I could taste CO2 with my tongue. And what I mean by that was the customer had went and bought hundreds of pounds of dry ice and filled the walk-in freezer with all that dry ice. And when I opened it, like, it was weird. I could taste something. It was weird. Just the air. I was like, there's not, what is this? And then I realized it was all dry ice in that box. And I told the manager, I said, that was one of the most dangerous things you can do. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, I bought the dry ice because it's cold. And I said, but you put it in an enclosed space and you close the door, and your employees are going in and out of that box filled with dry ice, and it's off gassing. And it's like, that is so dangerous, like so dangerous. And the manager was like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And I was like, it's that big of a deal that I'm not working on it till you get all that crap out of that box. And then I'll go in there after it's aired out, open up all the doors, let it vent. I'm not going in that box, you know? Crazy. Any manual D instruction in here? No, I don't have any manual D instruction for you. You're going to want to reach out to one of the ACRA training classes or something if you want to find out more about manual D for sure. If you reach out to my buddy Adam Muffich, he can probably give you some guidance on where to get some cool classes on manual D. That would probably help you a little bit. All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat. That would trip a CO2 alarm if one was in there. Yeah, it was a walk-in freezer. The beer walk-ins, they typically have CO2 alarms, but the walk-in freezers don't, because most manufacturers don't think that a manager is going to be dumb enough to buy hundreds of pounds of dry ice and shove it in an enclosed space in a walk-in freezer. So, all right. Do I work with digital compressors? No, I don't think I have any digital compressors out there at the moment. I'm trying to think if I've ever worked on a digital. I don't think I have. No. All right. Lots of folks commenting. Oh, okay. So yes, let's address this too. I'm looking at a list that I had made for me of a bunch of comments. So that's what I'm reading when you guys see me looking over. So I have issues. If you guys haven't figured that out, I got issues. Okay. If you haven't noticed that I'm a little particular in the way that I do things, I'm a little strange in my tendencies. I probably have some OCD type tendencies that you guys might notice in my videos. Yeah. Okay. I'm definitely different. I would consider myself to have a neurodivergent brain. Definitely operates differently. And I come to conclusions a lot differently than some people. It's really difficult sometimes because I try to explain things to people and I'm like, my brain just works differently. Like, you know, so why is it that in my video, I was frustrated to all heck about the manufacturer's name on the insulation of the walk-in cooler that I was installing? So long story short, I did a video where I was installing a walk-in cooler, and last minute we needed to go get some insulation because I didn't bring it with me. Okay. There was a lot of factors that went into that. And so I sent a service technician to another supply house that brands their insulation in big white writing with their supply house name on it. And it was driving me nuts. And I mentioned something in the video, and surprisingly, probably got like 4 or 5 people. They're like, dude, what the heck? Is it really such a big deal that the manufacturer has their name on the insulation? It's not. It's that it was so bold and so bright on there, and that kind of stuff drives me nuts. Okay. So I said I will never buy that insulation again because the writing on that insulation is so big and bold advertising that supply house. And I think that's stupid. Even the big name insulation manufacturers don't print their labels with bright white writing on the side of their insulation. So yes, I thought that was stupid, and I vented my frustration. Okay. You know, a lot of people, not a lot of people, there was 2 people in there that said, you know, they criticized me because I said that I would never buy that insulation again. Okay. The really cool thing, and what I said to one of them was like, look, you don't have to watch my videos. You know, like I'm not making people watch these, right? I'm very different. I have some really weird tendencies, and it is what it is. Okay. I apologize, but it's me. Deal with it. All right. Um, let's see what else we got going on there. Yeah, the good guy. It said AC Pro. That's right. And that drove me nuts. I thought that was stupid. Okay. I just can't deal with it. Where can you learn about refrigeration more, especially ice machines? Okay, so ice machines, you're going to need to reach out to the manufacturer. There's not going to be one centralized ice machine training you're going to go through. It just doesn't exist. Okay. You're going to need to reach out to the manufacturers and take their training classes. So for the beginners, they do regional trainings. They do them once a year, every manufacturer. Right now is ice machine training season. You can reach out to all of them. I just took Manitowoc ice machine training last week, but those are very intro basic classes. When you really start working on ice machines more and more, they have factory training. You'll have to send your technicians back. For Manitowoc, you go to Wisconsin. For Hoshizaki, you go to Peachtree City in Georgia. I don't know where you go for Scotsman or Isomatic. I don't know if they have factory training. Who knows? But regardless, you can do the factory trainings. Those are usually like 4 or 5 days or something like that. I've done factory training once for Manitowoc, and I'm talking like 12 years ago. It was a long time ago, but it was not at the Wisconsin factory training. They used to do a regional factory training in Lancaster, California, at one of the colleges years and years and years ago. It was really cool. It was just like Manitowoc training. They equipped the college with they had like 30 ice machines that all had switches on the back of them. And the manufacturer from Manitowoc at the time, it was Glenn Diamond, would come out. He's since retired. But Glenn would come out and then do the trainings. And then when you were done with the training, he would go flip the dip switches on the back of the machines and make them all have some kind of weird problems. And then you'd have to try to figure it out. It was a fun class, actually. I wish they'd do those regional ones again out here. But yeah, so for the ice machines, you're going to have to go to each individual manufacturer. And then for more refrigeration training, you're just going to need to start reading some books. I'm going to highly suggest that everybody... This is a great book to start with. It's called Commercial Refrigeration for Air Conditioning Technicians by Dick Wurz. This is a great book. This assumes that you have the basic fundamentals of air conditioning, and this is going to jump from that point and elaborate. And he has some great explanations, rules of thumb. This book really helped me. I was fortunate enough that I was able to take a live a live class online with Dick Wurz. When he was doing some trainings where he was actually teaching the class live, kind of like this right here. But I don't think he does that anymore, but it was kind of a fun thing, but it was online. But yeah, this is a great book. I highly suggest you guys get this. This really helps a lot of people with refrigeration stuff. And it's a small enough book that you can throw it in your work fan and just keep it in there. So. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. Daryl Fern says Fullett's right near his house. That's awesome. Yeah, I've done Fullett's regional trainings out here, but I've never done factory training. So Fullett's in Pennsylvania. That's right. They are in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Goals for my company in the next 5 years: to not go out of business. That's the goal for my company. You know, it's a fine balance with my company because I love fixing things. I hate running the business, but I love making videos and I love communicating with you guys. So it's a fine line. But in order to keep making my videos, I need my business so I can film my service calls. So I have to balance it between the two. And I have fun doing both of them. Ty says, great book. Him and his wife are really good people. Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting Dick Wurz at, was it the first symposium? The first or the second symposium? I think it was the first one. That was really cool. Surprisingly, I got to sit down at a dinner. I had Jim Bergman on one side and I had Dick Wurz on the other side, and I was sitting in between them, and it was really cool. Really cool to have dinner between the two of those guys. So let's see. Do I work with any EEVs? Yeah, I got a bunch of EEVs out there. Do a lot of heatcraft refrigeration work. They've got a lot of EEVs on their systems. So yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say a lot, but yeah, I do some EEV work. So thoughts on Heatcraft's 2-speed ECM motors. So John Deere fan, a lot of people want to hate on the manufacturers. Every manufacturer has to change right now. Okay. Let's put it this way. None of the manufacturers wanted to change their products. They didn't. Okay. They didn't want to change their products, but regulations make them have to make their equipment more energy efficient. These regulations are coming faster and faster and faster, to the point that these manufacturers, not mentioning specific names, but manufacturers in general, are having a hard time. You want to know why the price increases are going up so fast and so high? Is because the changes came on so fast for a lot of these manufacturers, right? Not all of them, but a lot of them. The changes came on so fast that they have to retool their entire factories to try to make this new equipment, and to make the equipment. And it's not just a matter of, okay, today we're going to make a new air conditioner in our same factory. It doesn't quite work like that, because they have new equipment. They have to program it differently. They've got robots. They got to do certain things to the equipment. Like, there's all kinds of different stuff. So the manufacturers, this is my opinion. I'm going to state this right now. Okay. These are my opinions. The manufacturers have to make so many changes so fast that it's hard for them to properly vet and test the equipment that they're having to push out. Okay. Before we had ECM motors, we had PSC motors. Before that, we had shaded pole motors. Okay. Shaded pole motors, they'd been operating with them for 30, 40 years, right? Then they threw the PSC motors in there. They weren't too big of a deal. They threw a capacitor on the side of a motor. It reduced the current consumption, and it worked okay. They had a few problems, but it wasn't that big of a deal. But then they had to like jump into this whole ECM motors, 2-speed motors, floating head pressure down, all these different things, right? And it didn't give the manufacturers, again, in my opinion, enough time to test and vet the motors, right? A lot of these motor manufacturers, there's only like 3 or 4 motor manufacturers out there, and they're making the same motors for everybody, and they're failing left and right everybody. It's not necessarily the manufacturers that you guys think of. You got to look all the way back to the motor manufacturers, and they're having problems with their motors, right? So it's a struggle for these manufacturers. So what's my opinion? My opinion on all these different manufacturers having to do all this different fancy stuff is that when change comes, there's always going to be hiccups and difficulties, and it's how they work through those changes, right? The manufacturers want to make good equipment, in my opinion. They want to have stuff that works and lasts and gives them a good reputation. It doesn't benefit them to make equipment that has parts that go bad every single week. Okay, yeah, you think that that's great for a manufacturer because they get to sell parts, but it's not great for their reputation, right? But they're all having to deal with this. You tell me a walk-in cooler manufacturer out there that has a 2-speed ECM fan motor, evaporator fan motor that lasts more than 5 years. Tell me which manufacturer has it. You guys can't name one, because they don't exist. Because the motors, there's too much technology going into those motors, and they're struggling to get them to handle the moisture intrusion and all that different stuff, let alone technicians and companies sizing the equipment right, reducing the humidity in the box the right way, and making sure that everything's working properly, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into it. So what do I think about all the fancy technology and all that stuff coming into this industry? I see it as a money-making opportunity, because stuff's going to continue to break, and I'm going to be honest and ethical, and I'm going to do my best to fix stuff, but I'm going to make money while I'm fixing it. So that's my 2 cents on that matter. All right, let's see what else we got going on in here. What piece of equipment is my first service call tomorrow? First service call tomorrow, I'm going to be installing a glass tender back bar cooler in a restaurant that has beer taps above it and a water dispensing glass washer on top of it. So we've got to go remove a 3-door or 4-door glass tender bar cooler out of an operating bar, and then reinstall a new bar cooler back in there and get it all done by 10 a.m. So we're going to start at 8 a.m., 10:30 a.m. probably. So let's see what else we got going on in here. My company is installing a Danfoss CO2 refrigeration condensing unit soon. Do I think that stuff will get big soon? It's for rack refrigeration. Yes, I think that CO2 refrigeration is going to get a lot bigger. If you guys want to learn more about CO2 refrigeration, I definitely think you need to check out my friends over at the Advanced Refrigeration Podcast, and they'll help you to understand a little bit more about the CO2 stuff. Reading through the chat right now. Okay, cool. Hey, you know what? And that's a great point. So Free Funky says, you think you know what restaurant that is, but you won't say anything. And I appreciate that. So that's the one thing I do want to address in my videos, in my all the stuff you guys see. I appreciate people keeping discretion when they see me working at restaurants, because the general public doesn't understand what goes on in restaurants, and they don't even understand what dirty is, because people see my videos and they think that an ice machine that has a little bit of black something or other in one of the hoses is the most disgusting thing, and the restaurant should be burned to the ground because of it. If you think I work in nasty restaurants, you really don't know anything about restaurants, because trust me, what you see in my videos is not even disgusting. I have worked in disgusting places before. Trust me, what you see in my videos is nothing. Nothing. There's some gross places out there for sure. Trevor Matthews, refrigeration mentor for CO2. Yeah, Trevor has some good information about CO2 too. But if you want to learn the actual technical aspects of it, Trevor definitely does some good intro stuff and has some great information for sure. Advanced Refrigeration Podcast is where you're going to learn the nitty gritty from service techs actually out in the field every single day working on it. But yeah, Trevor's a great resource too. Trevor also has some great compressor classes and different things too. So Brett Wetzel from Advanced Refrigeration, 100%. Yes. Have I worked on a water cooler reach-in cooler? Water cooler reach-in cooler. Water cooler reach-in cooler. I don't think I have. I don't know what you mean by that, but no. I don't think I have. I've worked on glycol reach-in coolers, but not water cooler reach-in cooler. Haven't seen many trains in my videos. Are they not popular? Yeah, trains not on a lot of. I've probably got, if I had to count, maybe 6 roofs with train equipment on it, if that. Most of my equipment is Lennox or Carrier. I probably have like 3 roofs with York equipment on it, but most of it's Carrier and Lennox is what I see on the most part. Okay, I already answered that one. Yeah, water cooled. I've done water cooled reach-in coolers. Yeah, I've done that. Well, water cooled reach-in coolers. No, I've done water cooled walk-in coolers. I'm trying to think if I've done water cooled reach-in coolers. No. All right. Well, it is time for me to wrap this up. My voice is about had it anyways. I really do appreciate you guys making it to the end of the video or the end of the stream. If you haven't already, please consider checking out my website, hvacrvideos.com. We got merchandise available there, hats, beanies, sweatshirts. The sweatshirts are on closeout right now, so they're $25 each within the United States. That includes shipping. If you're in Canada, sorry, but we have to charge the crazy Canadian shipping prices because they charge an arm and a leg to get up to the Canada. It's funny. I could go further across the United States than up to Canada sometimes, and it costs like ridiculously expensive to ship to Canada. But if you're in Canada, the base price is still $25, but it's plus the crazy Canadian shipping fee. But if you're in the United States, it's $25, including shipping. Yeah, zip up hoodies. They're great hoodies. They just don't sell as much. So we're trying to clear them out. So I really appreciate you. I'm going to close this out. Thank you so very much. And we will catch you on the next one for sure. And I'm going to hit up the outro music.